Most of Iceland's medieval manuscripts are now preserved in two institutes, the Árni Magnússon Institute in Reykjavik and the Árni Collection in Copenhagen. They both bear the name of Árni Magnússon, Iceland's greatest manuscript collector. Anyone who surveys the field of Icelandic manuscripts soon finds out that most items of importance have a siglum, which is a letter or symbol that stands for a word or name, especially when we want to denote a particular manuscript or edition of a text. A siglum starts with the letters AM, which is then followed by an ordinal number. AM in this context is the monogram of Árni Magnússon, or Arnas Magnius to use his Latinized name. If a manuscript is labeled with AM, it means that it is one of roughly 3,000 items from the collection assembled by Árni Magnússon. It was split up in two collections in the 1970s after the Danish government conceded to the Icelanders' claims to have their manuscripts back. Magnússon's career is certainly worth considering when studying the Icelandic sagas. It's a pivotal moment for the preservation of the material, because without Árni Magnússon's efforts to collect and preserve these texts, we may have lost them to history. Magnússon was born at Kvennabrekka, an Icelandic farm, in the year 1663. He came to Copenhagen for the first time in 1683 and immediately found work as assistant to prominent Danish antiquarians. The 17th century in Northern Europe saw a great enthusiasm for medieval manuscripts and documents. Intellectuals in Scandinavia turned their attention to digging up every available record on their country's early history. This passion was not merely inspired by some lofty humanistic ideals or poetic aspirations. It had a very concrete and practical value. Denmark and Sweden had waged wars on a regular basis for centuries, and by applying evidence from medieval manuscripts, both nations attempted to back up land claims against each other. Icelanders had a certain advantage over others when reading these manuscripts, since their language was much closer to the parlance found in the medieval sources than, for example, Danish and Swedish. And Árni Magnússon was no mediocre student of paleography. He quickly rose to an influential position in the academic world, becoming a designated professor in 1694 and archival secretary in 1697. In 1702, he was appointed by the king to travel to Iceland as a royal commissioner and compose a detailed land register where information about properties and the values of land parcels were to be listed. This meant that for the next 10 years, Árni traveled far and wide around the country and collected all the medieval manuscripts he could get his hands on. Obviously, a lot of them were only fragments when he got them, and remain so to this day. In several cases, however, he managed to aggregate 2 or more fragments from a single manuscript from different locations around the country and restore the original whole. When it came to estimating the utility of the material found in his manuscripts, Árni Magnússon had a clear criteria of quality. In his opinion, legendary sagas, romances, and other escapist literature was of little worth. Saints' lives, with their fanciful miracles and Catholic bigotry, were equally useless as a description of the past. King's sagas, annals, and chronicles, on the other hand, were highly rewarding. The greater the historiographical value of the source, the greater importance it had in his eyes. It goes without saying that, on the whole, the sagas of Icelanders enjoyed his respect. Towards the end of his life, Árni Magnússon suffered a serious blow when the Copenhagen fire of 1728 broke out, and his collection was severely damaged. Approximately 1/3 of the city was destroyed in the fire, and reconstruction took nearly a decade. Even if most of Árni's manuscripts were saved, 12 vellum manuscripts are known to have been lost, a considerable amount of younger paper manuscripts, and an unknown number of fragments. Furthermore, several valuable printed books, notes, and records were consumed by the flames. The single saga most affected by the event is without a doubt Heiðarvígar saga, the saga of the Heath slayings. 12 leaves of the single surviving manuscript were lost in the fire. And the only reason we now have that part of the story preserved is that Jón Ólafsson, Árni Magnússon's loyal assistant, recomposed it from memory. Consequently, the first half of the saga is related in an 18th century idiom pretending to be a medieval narrative.